Hi, I'm Richard Maraj, Senior Minister at Unity of Phoenix Spiritual Center, and I want to thank you for visiting our website and for tuning in to today's message. If you feel inspired by today's talk, I really encourage you to make a donation by hitting that button below and making a contribution to this ministry. It'll allow us to continue these messages online and to do the great work we do here at Unity of Phoenix, which is to inspire people to live better lives. So thanks for tuning in, thanks for your support, and we hope to see you at a Sunday real soon.
Morning again, everyone. And a shout out to everybody who tunes in and watches us online. Get ready. Get ready for a really, really bad joke. It's coming. Ready or not, it's coming. So a husband and wife have this huge argument, and they're not talking to each other. Silence for several days. Finally, on the third day, the husband asks his wife, "Where's that particular shirt of mine?" And the wife says, "Oh, so now you're speaking to me." And the husband looks a little confused, and he says, "Well, what are you talking about?" And she says, "Haven't you noticed that I haven't spoken to you for 3 days?" And the husband says, "No, I just thought we were getting along great." Whew. I am so single, he's saying. So today we're talking about silence. An interesting thing in this joke is that the two perspectives of silence that the husband had and the wife had. So my question for you is, when you think about silence, what do you think about? What kind of thoughts and feelings and perception do you have about silence? Interestingly, I read this week an article, and it said that one of our greatest fears in life is actually silence. That most of us at some level are uncomfortable with silence. We feel awkward in moments of silence. That sometimes silence actually triggers us feeling like we're alone, or we think that because there's silence that there's something bad or wrong with it. Sometimes we feel like silence is scary, and so scary and uncomfortable are we with regard to silence that when there is silence, we feel we need to fill it with something, with conversation, with activity, turning music on, or turning the TV on, even if we're not watching it, just to have some background music so we don't have to endure and experience silence. We live in a culture that's so busy, go, 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 fast, 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 do, that actually silence is actually uncharted waters for us. It is something we're not actually accustomed to and sometimes not even sure how to handle, let alone how to enjoy and fully be connected to it. How many people, when your meditation life, have ever felt a little fidgety or had a hard time staying still for a long time? Anybody ever have that? And how many people have ever felt uncomfortable with too much silence and too much quiet? Anybody? So silence, while it might seem scary and uncomfortable, while being quiet might feel unproductive or even negative or like it's doing nothing, the truth is that silence is one of the most powerful, healing, creative and transformational energies and experiences that we can have. And I believe it is hugely misunderstood and hugely underutilized. The Bible tells us in so many ways how valuable and how important it is for us to have times and experiences of silence in our lives on a regular basis. In the Old Testament, it actually says that words are like silver, but silence is like gold. That silence is a powerful and important thing that we're encouraged. In the book of Zechariah, it says, "Be silent before the Lord." Isaiah says, "In quietness, you will find your strength." It says in the Psalms, "Be still and know that I am God." Jesus said, "Come to a quiet place and rest." And we're told, listen to the still small voice of God. In so many areas, we are encouraged to live a life of quiet and silence, not run from it or avoid it or make ourselves busy. It is to actually deepen and to welcome and to seek moments of silence and quietness. There are great benefits. There are amazing things that happen out of silence. If you look in the Bible, some of the greatest things that happened actually started with silence, were born out of silence. It said in the beginning, the world was void and empty and quiet, and then God said, "Let there be light." It is out of silence that the world was created. When Jesus was born, Mary and Joseph tried to go to the inn. It was too crowded. And the fact is, Jesus, the Christ, was born in an open space in the quiet and the silence. Before he preached, before he did any healing, he went alone and entered the silence. And even his resurrection happened in the silence of the tomb that he had risen. If you look at the Apostle Paul, his great conversion happened in the silence of being blinded for 3 days. Amazing things happen in our lives out of the silence. And we literally cheat and rob ourselves of these great things by not taking the time to be still. You know, there was even done a study at Duke University with mice, and it showed that 2 hours of daily silence actually triggered cell development in their hippocampus. That silence actually helped them develop in healthier and better ways. So my question for you is, what is your relationship with silence? What do you believe about silence? How important a role does silence and the practice of silence take place in your spiritual life? How many people at some level would be open to believe that silence is a powerful spiritual tool and resource that we could use? And how many people would say, by how you use it now, there's lots of room for you to improve the consistency of how much you use silence? You know, so I'd mentioned that this summer I did a 10-day silent retreat. 10 days. I've done 3 days and 4 days. I never did 10 days. So I was a little excited, a little nervous about what it would be like to be in silence for 10 days. And this place, it was a Southern California Vipassana Center. It was not only silence as you can't speak, they also took your phone, so there was no phones, there was no reading, there was no journaling, there was no exercising, no television, there was no eye contact with the other people. There was no physical contact with the other people. There was no contact with the outer world. You know, you were encouraged to eat only 75% of the amount of food that you normally eat. There was no exercise. They wanted silence in every possible way so that you could be still in. Just take a message for me, please. Be right back. And I will tell you, that experience was harder and better, more challenging, and more transformational than I ever expected. There were more blessings from silence. And I knew silence was powerful. I've done silence, but it literally took me to a deeper level of understanding and appreciation and practicing silence in my daily life. So what I wanted to do was really share with you some of the blessings of silence, some of the incredible benefits of silence so we can all deepen our experience of God and life. One of the questions I got asked when I come back was, what was it like to not speak for 10 days? There's no way I could ever go 10 days without speaking. And I'll tell you, I found it easy to not speak for 10 days because instantly you began to notice the benefits. Not speaking began to slow things down. And it brought a level of calmness and clarity that I found was absolutely incredible. For my type A-ness of how I live, that the intensity dropped, I didn't feel stress, and it was really, really peaceful and clear. So much so, just moving from building to building, there was a level of sacredness and a reverence of just moving around. I found myself enjoying just eating a meal in silence. You know, to taste the food and the crunch, you know, the creaminess of the peanut butter in the morning. It was amazing. 31 meals of just eating in silence was incredible. Another thing that was incredible was being in a room with 65 people and we're all in silence. It was an incredibly sacred experience. So one of the things I realized about not talking, it really slows things down and opens up some space in life to notice things we don't always notice. There was a peace and a calmness, but I also became more present to nature, more present to the beauty around me, just more present and aware, more connected even to my own self. It was amazing how I felt more alive and more engaged by just not speaking and beginning to notice so much around me, including feeling a greater connection to me. And one of the things I find about silence is not only brings peace and brings you present and you feel more connected, it actually opens a path to greater inspiration and ideas. Do you know what Einstein did when he wanted to create something? First thing, he took a nap so he could quiet his mind and clear it. Because when a mind is quiet and clear, guess what? It's open for inspiration. It's open for ideas. It's open for creativity. Silence restores our peace. It brings us more present, more alive and engaged in life. It makes us feel more connected to our soul, to ourselves, to our higher purpose, to God's Spirit. And it opens us as a greater channel for creativity and inspiration. David went from a shepherd boy to being the king. And one of the things he says in Psalm 131, verse 2, he says, I have cultivated a quiet heart. He cultivated a life of quietness. And I know that helped him elevate from a shepherd boy to a king. Is because he connected with the quietness that led him in his life. How many people remember Dallas, the show, J.R. Ewing? Remember Larry Hagman? I watched it when I was a kid. I watched Larry Hagman on a talk show, and he said one of the things he did was he had Silent Sunday. There was one day a week he talked to no one, that he was silent. And he originally did it because he had some vocal cord issues, but he loved it so much. He did not speak one day a week. He had Silent Sunday for 20 years. He credited it as one of the things that helped him in his success, in his relationship, in his career, because he became still. Like David, he cultivated a quiet heart. Like David, he made a commitment to daily silence and quietness in his life. What I've been doing is spending Thursdays as my quiet day. And I do some emails, but I don't speak, and I do as much meditation as I can. Sometimes it's only half a day, but every week I have some silence. And if by chance something happens on Thursday, then I make it Friday. And if it's full day or half day, it doesn't matter, because I fully get how powerful silence is. So what way would you be willing to add more silence in your life? What way would you be willing to cultivate a quiet heart and to have more stillness and quietness in your life? Maybe it'd be like 5 minutes every day. You just sit in the silence. Maybe if you're a couple, you could sit together for 5 minutes in the silence. Maybe instead of saying grace with your family at night, it would be just 5 minutes of silence, even 3 minutes of silence. And to begin to incorporate regular, consistent silence into our lives, I tell you, will do amazing and wonderful things. So another thing I learned was that long periods of silence helps you learn about your mind and help you teach you how to manage it better. How many people ever meditated and you found your mind was wandering? Anybody ever wandering mind? And sometimes you think, oh, I forgot to call the plumber about that leak. I got to pick up some bread. All kinds of things. And so if you were to say in 5 minutes of meditation, what percentage of that does your mind wander when you meditate for 5? How many people say 50%? How many people more like 90%? And so think about that. About 90% of our mind wanders in 5 minutes of meditation. Well, at this retreat, we did 11 hours of meditation. Imagine how much mind wandering that would be. 11 hours a day for 10 days. You would think that's 110 hours of meditation. Really, I should have come back like Moses coming down from Mount Sinai. My hair should have been all white. I should have been glowing and radiating. I should have been levitating and not even walking. It didn't quite happen that way. But here's the thing. When you spend 11 hours in meditation and the mind wanders most of the time, you know what happens? You begin to notice where your mind wanders. You begin to notice your own patterns of what triggers you into feeling insecure or angry or fearful or what it is you tend to worry about. And noticing those things are absolutely vital to helping us overcome ourselves and manage our minds in greater ways. And you know what happens with the mind, why it wanders, where it goes predominantly? We in the past and in the future. Our mind, when we're meditating, tends to worry about some regret we have or some mistake we made or some fear we have about the future. And what we begin to do in our heads, we avoid and dislike some things, and then we are attached and crave other things. Like, you ever had a beautiful moment and you thought, I wish this moment never ended? Or my life is so good, I hope it always stays that way. That's attachment. Or this is how life should be. This is the only way. And then the other one is, I hated that happened. So we're avoiding and we're attaching and craving. And what it is said is that creates suffering for us. Our own mind jumping around and us getting attached or avoiding or being fearful creates pain and suffering in each and every one of us. How many people ever overthink anything? Everybody overthink? or obsess? Any control freaks in the house? See, most control freaks don't raise their hand because that feels like they're out of control. So thank you for the 4 people for raising your hands. And it's called monkey mind. The human mind jumps around by its very nature. Remember when the Apostle Paul said, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Do you know why he said that? It's because the human mind needs renewing a lot. The human mind jumps around and gets distracted often, going to the past, going to the future, going from one subject to the next. And sometimes when that happens in meditation, our first thing is, I'm not doing this right. Something must be wrong. This meditation stuff doesn't work. And we get frustrated and irritated at ourselves because we can't keep our mind focused and centered. And so what I've come to realize, I realized in that is that's how the mind is. Stop expecting and wishing and getting frustrated that our mind won't wander when it will always wander. That is a part of the deal. And so so the question is, how do we handle it? That's the bigger question. Not how do I make my mind stop from doing that? It's how do I handle it in those moments? And here's what I learned. 2 sets of things. The first one is acceptance. When you stop fighting against reality, you feel more peace. The fact is, every one of us, when we meditate, our minds will wander and jump around. Part of the deal. So it's to just accept it and don't feel frustrated or resist. And the second is have compassion for yourself. You're not messing up. You're not goofing up. It's just part of the deal. When there's acceptance and compassion, then you can gently bring your mind back easily without beating yourself up or shaming yourself. And you bring it back easily and joyously. And then you do the next 2 things, which is about patience and persistence. Buddha said something really great. He said, it doesn't matter how many times you forget. It's how many times you remember. The mind will wander and forget, and all you got to do is just bring it back. Just remember. Mind wanders like crazy, start again, bring it back. Just keep bringing it back. The more you keep bringing it back with acceptance and compassion, not resistance or blame, and the more you're patient and persistent, the more your mind will drop into greater levels of peace, greater levels of wisdom, greater levels of understanding. So what I began to realize is that the mind jumping around is a part of the game of life and meditation. And instead of hating it, let me get into it and enjoy it and utilize it and do it the best I can. How many people play golf? That's a hard, crazy game. It is insane. Is it surprising that one of the swings they call a stroke? Because that's what you feel like trying to get that little ball into that little hole. It's ridiculous. It's an insane game. It's really stunning. You know how much money people spent on golf last year? $70 billion. It is an insanely hard, crazy game, and yet people keep playing it. So what I realized was when the mind jumps around, it's hard like golf, but it's worth it. Hang in there. Keep trying. Keep being persistent, because it is the greatest thing you could do to bring healing and peace and joy and inspiration into your life is to seek God. And the 2 things I've realized is don't make it an onerous thing, prayer. I've heard people say stuff like, I pray in the morning so I could just get it over with. Get it over with? This should be a joyful thing. Sometimes you think, I got to pray, forgot to pray. It's like, no, this should be we are connecting with the intelligence and the creative power and the source that created the sun and the stars and the oceans and every single cell in our body and this amazing world that we live in. That should be exciting. So 1, accept these things are going to happen and make it a joyful experience to meditate. It says, delight yourself in the Lord and He will give you the desires of your heart. The more you could hang in there and be accepting and patient and delight yourself in it, guess what? The deeper you'll go into spirit. The deeper you'll go into clarity and peace and wisdom and understanding. That breakthroughs will come. Healing, changes and transformations will come by going deeper into the very source that makes everything possible. And the final thing I want to talk about is that there is a deeper level of healing that happens when you keep meditating and going into silence for a long time. They warned us that day 2 would be hard because that's when your patterns start showing up. But they said day 6 would be really hard because that's when your deeper stuff starts coming up. And so it's when all that stuff that was buried, the shame or the abuse or the things we didn't want to tell ourselves about that we spent so much of our life stuffing down, that's when it starts coming up. One of the things I noticed was on day 6, and it happened on 7 and 8 as well for me, was, you ever said something like this, like something comes up and you thought, I thought I already dealt with that. Anybody ever had one of those? I thought I was complete. I thought I was okay. Those things started coming. And then other things that I knew I had already, but they came even more intense. And then the worst one was stuff came up that I didn't even realize. There were some memories and recollections of some things and some things that got triggered in me that I did not even know. See, when you sit in the quiet for a long time, what happens is some of those deep things that we've buried for decades begin to come up. And again, we think something's wrong. There's nothing wrong. Exactly, something is actually right that's happening. I find in all my experience with counseling and stuff is that often people in their 50s, stuff starts coming up from when they were younger, because after they've done all their running around and doing family and career, it's like finally their soul's ready to say, okay, it's time to heal this. It's time to deal with this and face this and be liberated from it. And so that process, what I've realized, is an important thing, and not to stop. That you aren't doing anything wrong. In fact, your soul is ready to release that junk, to create more peace. I always say in the prosperity class, if you have a glass and they got dirt on the bottom, how do you get it out without touching the glass? And the way you do it is to pour water in and keep pouring water in, and then the dirt starts coming up. And you could think, oh man, this isn't working. No, but it is. And you got to keep pouring, and eventually the dirt will come out. And that's what it's like with that stuff in us. The water represents prayer and silence and meditation, and yeah, it'll bring up stuff, and you'll think it's going wrong. No, it's going right. You're doing great work. Just hang in there. You weren't allowed to talk, but you could see a counselor for a 5-minute appointment, and I didn't go except I went for day 6. And I said to the guy, I said, this thing's kicking my butt, man. And he said, good, it's supposed to. I said, thank you for your compassion. And and he said, just keep at it. Keep at it. It'll free yourself. You'll free yourself from it, and things will get better. And the thing is, I already knew that, but sometimes our human self needs a little reassurance to know, you're not alone, and everything's going to be okay. And that was a really beautiful and important experience for me. A student went to his meditation teacher and said, my meditation is horrible. I feel distracted. My legs ache. I'm constantly falling asleep. This is just horrible. And the teacher smiled and said, it'll pass. A week later, the same student comes back to his teacher and he says, my meditation is wonderful. I'm so aware. I'm so peaceful. I'm so alive. It's just wonderful. And the teacher smiles and says, it'll pass. And that's one of the things about life is sometimes we want to avoid and run away from the hard stuff and think everything good should always be. But the fact is that it's all a part of life. It's important to not run from any of it. Sometimes we think that life's only a miracle when you're on the mountaintop and you're victorious and you're feeling on your A game. But guess what? Life is a miracle when you're curled up in the fetal position under your bed thinking, I'll never get out there again. Life is always a miracle. Embrace it all. Don't make one better. Don't judge one as worse, right, wrong. It's life. It's your life. Be present to it. Be alive to it. Embrace it. Feel it. Experience it. Taste it and touch it. Don't sell ourselves short by running and avoiding from certain things. It's all life, and it's beautiful. The challenges before you is a part of your life. Embrace it. Open yourself to it. Go deeper in your silence for the guidance of how to move through it, but don't avoid it or run from it. David Hawkins has a book called Surrender, the Letting Go, the Path to Surrender. And he says most people do a certain practice, and when life gets better, they just stop. But he says, no, keep doing it. Keep doing silence all the time, because you'll have deeper breakthroughs. Things will happen, and you'll have quantum leaps in your life, in your success, and in your happiness. And so my question for you is silence. Don't be afraid of it. Don't run from it or avoid it. Welcome it, embrace it, and realize what a powerful resource that is and a spiritual tool it is for you. Remember Blaise Pascal said the greatest misfortune for human beings comes from one thing, our inability to be still. that we deny ourselves so much by not taking time to be still. You remember when it says, be still and know that I am God? It means be still and know the fullness of life. Be still and know what peace and clarity is. Be still and open yourself to be a channel for inspiration and creativity. The more you're still, the more you open yourself to God, open yourself to life, open yourself to joy and possibilities. A great life is waiting for us. The question is, are you willing to allow yourself to be blessed by the gift of silence? God bless you all.